Hello, everyone. This is Bill Apter, and I just finished taping an episode of Count It Out with Mike and Tyler, or Tyler and Mike. They're brilliant hosts. You've got to listen. You've got to see. Count It Out. Yeah, I endorse it. They've got the After Chat seal of approval.
Hey guys, this is Tyson Kidd, and you're listening to Count It Out with Mike and Tyler.
Well, we are live, pals, and welcome to a very special edition of Count It Out with Mike and Tyler. That is the Bill Apter sealed of approved Count It Out with Mike and Tyler. My name is Tyler, and I am not joined by Mike today. Instead, I am joined by a former two-time AWA Tag Team Champion, one half of the most popular tag teams in WWF history, the Killer Bees, and who I personally think throws the best dropkick in the history of professional wrestling. Of course, I am talking about the legendary Jumping Jim Brunzell. Jim, thank you so much for doing this today. I am so excited for this.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. You know, I've had an opportunity to do a number of podcasts in the last year, and it's fun. And you know, I get a lot of good feedback, and you know, it's always good. You know, I've been, I'll be 73 in August, and I've been out of the business since 1999, and I still communicate with some of my buddies. So it's always fun to reconnect with the fans, although the fans that were, privy to the High Flyers and the Killer Bees are getting up there in age.
Yeah. Well, I grew up with you as well, Jim. I'm 30. I turned 38 years old in the next couple of weeks. So I got to grow up with the Killer Bees and, really that height of that rock and wrestling era. And I can't wait to dive into a whole bunch of stuff with you today. Okay. I love the fact that you and Brian are out there doing all the conventions still. I got the pleasure to meet you guys in Niagara Falls, Canada a couple of years ago. You guys were nothing but awesome. How much fun do you have out there on those conventions talking to all the fans?
Well, it's fun, because you see a lot of enthusiasm, and I look forward to it because when people come out and see you, it's a sign that you did something well in your business, in your profession, and Brian and I were very fortunate, as were Greg and I were very fortunate to work with some real good workers in the wrestling business, and it just helped further us on.
Yeah, and the conventions must be fun for you as well, because you get to see a bunch of your old buddies, because usually there's a bunch of wrestlers booked together, so you guys probably get a nice time to catch up as well, eh?
Well, I was in Dallas, and it was called the WrestleCon. It was right before WrestleMania in Dallas, and we were there for 2 days, and oh man, they had just a ton of fans there, my goodness. But it was fun. I saw Rick, the Nature Boy, and I saw Jake Roberts and Bret Hart, and it was a lot of fun. We didn't get a chance to talk much because a number of the lines were extremely long, and these people pay a lot of money for those autographs, so more power to the boys.
Absolutely. I love it. So I guess I kind of want to go back right to the beginning then. The business was a lot different back when you were breaking in. Now it's pretty easy there's wrestling schools all over the place, but it was a lot more exclusive back then. How did you get your foot in the door in a business that was so protected and tight knitted back then?
Well, I knew Greg Gagne. Greg and I were walk-on freshmen at the University of Minnesota football team. He was a quarterback and I was a wide receiver. And of course, his dad was the legendary, heavyweight champion of the AWA, Vern Gagne. So I had got to be over there as a friend of Greg's during our, couple of years at the university. And then Greg transferred to the University of Wyoming because he wasn't going to play quarterback. So I continued at the University of Minnesota, and afterwards I had a brief tryout with the Washington Redskins, didn't get called back. So I was going to go back to school and get my degree. I had about 30 credits left. And Greg, who finished at Wyoming, called me during the middle of the summer, and he says, hey, he says, my dad's going to train Ken Patera, who's going to be competing in the Olympics. And we have another wrestler from Iran called Khosrow Vaziri. Would you be interested in trying out? And I thought, well, something athletic. So I thought, why not? I went, I was just going to go to school. So I started the camp, and it was 6 weeks long. It was 6 days a week, and it was 4 to 6 hours a day. And Ric Flair was there, Bob Bruggers, who was a football player in the NFL, and he was a very talented wrestler. He broke his back in an airplane crash in North Carolina. And Khosrow Vaziri, Ken Patera, and myself and Greg. So we had a heck of a team and class that participated in that. And it was funny because Billy Robinson, who was a British Empire champion and a little bit sadistic guy, would sort of grind on us and put these submission holds on us. And then, at about the last 15 or 20 minutes of the session, Vern would come in and rub our nose on the mat. So it was it was quite an experience, and I think I benefited a lot from it, as most of the guys did. And our class was probably one of the most successful classes that ever come out of any wrestling camp.
Oh, 1,000%. Names like you just mentioned, Ken Patera, the Iron Sheik, and of course the good old Nature Boy, Ric Flair. What are some of your early memories of Rick? Because obviously he went on to be many considered the greatest of all time. What was a young Ric Flair like back in the day?
Well, he was made for the professional wrestling business. I remember, he could do interviews before any of us even knew what interviews were, because he was a big fan. Plus, he was a born showman. And I think Rick was like the rest of us, were all minnows jumping into a big sea. He was a whale jumping into a pond, because he was way ahead of everybody. And, just look at his career. And now he's going to wrestle at 73. And I thought, oh, geez, but he can't hide from that spotlight. He's got to find it. So more power to him. And I just hope he doesn't get hurt.
Yeah. What were your thoughts when you heard he was going to get back in the ring in a couple months there in August, the end of July?
Well, I actually, outside of Rick's, he's got some heart problems. He still has stayed in good shape. And for a fellow who's taken as many bumps as he has throughout his career, I can't believe he doesn't have anything, any replacements. My 10th surgery, I had my right shoulder, what they call it's a reverse right orthoplasty, which they put a new shoulder in this one. I got 2 new shoulders, 2 knees, and a hip.
Jeez.
So, I think a lot of it was the high flying, not drop kicks, because I up pretty high, and then I came down and I used my forearms and my shoulders as shock absorbers when I landed. And then, I don't know, I probably threw a couple 3,000 drop kicks in a 27-year career. So I just grinded up my shoulders. They were pitiful.
Oh, that's tough. How are you feeling today, though? The surgery's helping out. Are you feeling a little bit better?
Well, it's good. As you can see, I've had some nerve damage in my wrists and my hands, so my hand swells, and it's been 12 weeks now, and I'm doing hand therapy. I just lost complete strength in my hand. So I've been doing hand therapy a couple times a week along with my shoulder. But, for a long time, for about, 3.5 years, it hurt to put a shirt on, I couldn't lift my arm up, and it was just, so I needed the surgery desperately. And The only drawback is that because of the surgery and because this prosthesis is drilled into a thin part of your scapula, is that I can't lift more than 20 pounds in my right arm. Otherwise, I might pull the thing right out of the socket.
Jeez.
So I'm not looking forward to that, but so I'll have a what do they call it? Fiddler crab arm on this side, and this side, hopefully I'll be able to maintain a little bit of muscularity.
Well, just from a fan standpoint, I want to thank you for all the sacrifices that you made, because I don't think a lot of people take a step back and realize that the abuse that you guys put your body through, right? You know, we just see you as these larger than life superhumans, but the bumps are real. And unfortunately, they're catching up with you a little bit there. But I just want to thank you for everything that you did and sacrificed for us as a fan.
Well, thanks, Tyler. You know, when you're doing it, you're just doing your job, you know, and you don't really realize, like I said before, the damage that you might be doing on your body. But, you know, it could be a lot worse, but I feel very fortunate that I survived this business, because so many guys of my, you know, my buddies didn't make it, you know. Passed away and all sorts of problems, but thank the Lord that I had a great wife who really did an outstanding job with my kids. You know, I realized that wrestling was a business, and I tried to keep that foremost and never say, "Oh God, look at the articles," or, you know, try to put more than it really was into it. So I maintained my grounding, I guess.
Oh, that's awesome, man. I love to hear that. I love to hear that for sure. So let's go back to the AWA here, and you know, you're teaming up with Greg Gagne now. You guys were obviously friends. Was that kind of Greg's idea that he wanted to team up with you, or how did the High Flyers come to be?
Well, when I first started, and we all first started, they sent me down to Kansas City. I was down there for like 10 months in the Central States wrestling. It was part of the NWA. And they tagged me up with a fellow by the name of Mike George, who was an amateur wrestler out of St. Joe, Missouri. Good guy and a big kid. You know, he was like 6'2" and a half and about 240. And so we got involved in the tag team, and we had Lord Alfred Hayes and Roger Kirby to work with down there, along with Bulldog Bob Brown and a couple other people. And, you know, when you go to those smaller territories, you wrestle every night. And I was there for, I think, just about a year. And I remember it was, you know, twice on Saturday, twice on Sunday, and every day in between. And you know, it was fortunate that you could drive and then be back, but it was a great experience because I got to meet the Briscoes and, you know, Dory Funk and Terry Funk, and watch different guys in the ring. And I think it was very influential for me in picking up different things that I could use in my repertoire.
You know, you mentioned a name I have to ask you about. Terry Funk is one of my favorites of all time. And you hear the legendary stories inside and outside the ring. Can you tell a fun Terry Funk story? Anything come to your mind when you think of Terry?
Well, he used to call, you know, my name's Jim, and he used to call me Sonny. And he was a heck of work. I remember we were working in Columbus, Ohio at Ohio State, and he was the Atlantic heavyweight wrestling champion, TV championship. And I was working with him, and I had just coming in at the end of my run in North Carolina, and I was working in Atlanta. So he was going to drop the belt to me. So Terry was the type of guy that when you went in the ring, you never discussed anything. You know, it's just, it was just moment to moment. And I remember thinking, well, I said, well, what do you want to do? And he said, Sonny, he says, just follow me and everything will be okay. So at the very end, it was just in and out of the ring. And all of a sudden I did something and caught him in a small package, 1, 2, 3, boom. He kicked out, and I raised my hand, and he knew he was going to lose the belt, so he didn't bring it that night. So I never got the heavyweight championship belt, so I'm but he was a great guy. I mean, he's a great guy. I know he's had some mental issues, and he was a type of performer that, could come into the ring after being on the road and heavily drinking for 2 or 3 days and not miss a, step. He was just incredible. The talent, the timing and the ability that both him and Dory were great, as were the Briscoes. They were great guys. Harley Race, there was a heck of a lot of great talent there.
Yeah, Harley's one of the greatest champions of all
Yep.
time too. I love watching Harley. I always hear the story when I do my research for interviews, and you always hear people tell the Harley Race story, but when they're working with them and they go, Mr. Race, what would you like to do today? And he's got a cigarette and goes, what's your finish? I'll move. I just thought that's so cool. Like such a great, Harley Race, one of the best ever.
I'll tell you a quick story about Harley Race. We were going to we were in Kansas City. We were going to Wichita. So I have a Hispanic wrestler who's making his way from New York through Kansas and going to Texas. So he's going to ride with me to Wichita. So we're going to Wichita and 100 miles from, and I'm driving down the road, and all of a sudden I felt a little bump on the back of my car. And I looked in the rear view, you couldn't see anything. And what had happened, Harley had turned his light off, and he had this Pontiac, souped up Pontiac, and he got up behind me, turned his lights off, and he started pushing me 105 miles an hour.
Jeez. Wichita
Turnpike. And I was petrified. And the poor Hispanic wrestler looked at me and he said, "Oh, amigo," and his eyes tennis. And so finally, after it went on for, I don't know, a minute or two, and all of a sudden I could feel him disengage from the back of my bumper. And he put his lights on and he passed me on the shoulder going about 110 miles an hour. We get to the auditorium in Wichita. So I'm coming in and he's sitting there, and he looked up at me and he said, "Jimmy, how was your ride here?" Little did but I mean, push somebody down the road at 100 miles an hour. That's
some scary stuff.
Yeah. But he was a character.
Oh, that's amazing. How much pressure was it teaming up with Greg? Because, the boss's son, Vern, is such a legendary performer. Does that put a lot of extra pressure on you, especially when they're getting ready to put the titles on you guys?
Tyler, I don't think so. Because when I was in the AWA with Greg, there was about 12 or 14 guys there. Nick Bockwinkel, Bobby Heenan, Bobby Duncan, Blackjack Lanza, Angelo Mosca, Mad Dog Vachon, Crusher, and everybody had their own position. Everybody knew where they fit, and everybody made good money. So there was no pressure. I felt sorry for Greg, because Greg had a lot of pressure on him, because, it's hard to be the champ, the son of a legendary, champion. And I think, because Greg was a little slighter than I was in the ring, but he was a great worker. He had great, could do anything. I got a cough for a sec, excuse me. Okay. So yeah, but it was great in the fact that Greg and I had such great talent to work with, Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson and Les Wolf. And I mean, every night it was just, and then Bockwinkel and Heenan were the top of the heap. I consider Bobby Heenan probably the greatest all around talent that I worked with or was around with, the guy who, could do anything in the ring. Plus, he had great timing, and his interviews were spotless. It's just, fabulous. He had so much heat on him from all these different people. Thank you. My wife brought me some.
Oh, look at that! Perfect.
I think it's rum and coke.
It's never too early. It's 12 o'clock somewhere, right? It's 12 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah, Friday.
I'm from Canada, so we like to have our little rum and cokes over here as well. Don't worry.
Yes.
So, I can't let you off the hook talking about Bobby Heenan without sharing some stories. Everybody says he's one of the greatest and funniest guys in the business. What are some of your favorite Bobby Heenan stories?
Oh, geez. Well, Bobby was a character, and he loved his alcohol. I mean, he could drink constantly, and it was funny. He wouldn't be a fall down type, silly drunk, but he got funny and funnier. And I remember we wrestled in Denver on a Friday night, had a great house. On Saturday morning, we'd fly Northwest Airlines back to Minneapolis. We'd get in at 9:30. We'd be at the studio to tape interviews and maybe tape a 45-minute one show. And they'd have us do all of our interviews for the upcoming 2 weeks. And then at 4:30, boom, everything was done. And then we'd wind up flying to either Chicago, Milwaukee, or Green Bay to do another show. So everybody had been partying in Denver, and Bobby walked over to the table where Vern Gagne was and Wally Carbo, and they had all the layout of the interviews, how they were going to do the interviews, for the hour and a half or 2 hours for the different towns. So Bobby leaned over him to see where his men were. He had Bockwinkel, and he had Stevens and Patterson and somebody else. So as he leaned over, Vern Gagne went, and he looked up at him and he says, "Heenan," he says, "you've been drinking." And Bobby looked at him and he says, "You can't smell vodka," and he walked away. It was just stuff like that. And I remember one time I was working with Bobby Duncombe, and we were on our way to Winnipeg, and we were wrestling at the Red Lake Indian Reservation. So we had all these Native American Indians sitting in the stands, and it was harder than heck. You could hear a pin drop. So Bobby Duncombe and I are trying everything to get something going and trying to get little people a little interested in. And we'd gone about 15, 18 minutes, and Duncombe had my neck over the rope and was, choking me, and the referee was pushing back. Meanwhile, Bobby's sitting there in a chair with a big glass of Coke, and he looks at me, he throws the Coke in my face as I'm selling being choked over the rope. And he says, "I'm going to the locker room." He says, "This is the most boring match I've ever seen."
Oh, Bobby Heenan, the greatest. Oh, I had a freeze here.
Incredible.
I could listen to Bobby Heenan stories all day. Another name you mentioned, and you always hear guys, I think I'm just going to throw my questions out the window because you keep mentioning all these names, and I just got to talk about them. Ray Stevens, everybody, you always hear how good of a worker Ray was, and he's the type of guy that you don't hear so many people talk about this day. Do you think Ray gets the respect he deserves from the wrestling world? Was he as good as everybody says he is?
Oh, he was great. He was one of the top three guys in the ring. His timing and what he did and his bump taking, and he really was in the era of the late 50s and 60s. That's when he was, king of. He was incredible, and he worked in San Francisco and I can't remember the booker's name there, but he was wanted every place. He was incredible. I mean, and he was another quite a drinker on the road, and he just went. It was just like getting up in the morning and taking a shower. I mean, it was so natural in the ring with him, and he had the opportunity of working at a couple different places that really saw his genius, and the fact is that he really didn't, he was a little bit too old to get into the age of Hulk Hogan and this and that, where people could really appreciate him. He was a little over his time in terms of his skill level and his age, but he was one of the, I'd say, top three wrestlers of my generation.
Wow. Yeah, you hear a lot of people say that about Ray, and he's tough to even go online and find his matches. There's not a lot of stuff to go back and even watch. So he's kind of like this mystique, about Ray Stevens.
Yeah, he I remember, I remember he and Pat would come in the ring, and we were in Denver, and it was Greg and I, and we were wrestling him, and it was sort of a big match, so we were a little tense and everything. So as we got to the middle of the ring, the four of us, and the referee is going to go through this stuff, Ray spits out, he had a full mouth piece of dentures, and he covered his mouth and he started going like APAs. And Greg and I looked at each other and we almost started laughing. I mean, it was, and then all of a sudden he put his hand around, put his teeth back in, and away we started. But I mean, he did that just to break us up, to make us relax. And it was, that was Ray.
Oh, that's amazing. And you mentioned another name too. A couple months ago, we had the privilege to interview Paul the Butcher Vachon. And
Sure.
you mentioned his brother Mad Dog, being the Canadian. I got to know, what's it like being around the legendary Mad Dog Vachon, because he just seemed like another one of those characters that was unpredictable.
Well, I can relate to you. I'll relate a real quick story. I was scared to death of him because you never know. He was a nice guy. He was very polite, but you never know what he was capable of any time of the day. So we're wrestling in Denver. So he looked like he had his hood up over his head, and he had the little goatee, and he's looking at me like that. And I thought, oh boy, here we go. So we go to tie up. He puts me into the turnbuckle. He hits me. So I reverse him and I hit him, and he says, harder. So I hit him again harder, and he says, harder. So when I went to punch him, I hit him right on the bean of the jaw, and his eyes crossed, and he went down to the bottom turnbuckle. He popped his butt on the turnbuckle, and he shook his head, and he looked at me, and he poked me in the eye, and then he fish hooked me. He put his finger in my mouth and turned it real hard, and then threw me through the rope. I'm on the floor. So I'm laying on the floor and thinking, oh my God. And all of a sudden it's a blackout. And I see this black, like somebody turned the lights on. He jumped from the apron with both of his feet on my chest, knocked the wind completely out of me. So as he's throwing me into the ring, he says, not that hard. So we had the rest of the match, but I'll never forget that. Honestly,
Oh my God.
I told that at his funeral, and it got a great laugh. But he was, you never knew what he was going to do. Never. He'd see something, and I'm the Mad Dog, and he was. He was out there.
Yeah.
You heard about the time he opened up the plane door, didn't you, on the small plane?
No.
Omaha, Nebraska?
No, I've never heard that.
Okay. Well, here, I'll tell it to you real quick. I was afraid of this damn plane. It was a 7-passenger, and we had an old, I think he was Air Force pilot who flew it, and he'd never deviate between two spots. So if there was thunderstorms between Toronto and St. Paul, instead of going around this way, he'd go right through them,
Jeez.
So Mad Dog, and I wasn't flying on the small plane because that was just too scary. So we're wrestling in Omaha, and he came up to me and he says to me, his son had gotten in trouble in Montreal, and he said to me, Jimmy, he said, do you have any uppers? And a lot of the guys who drove, used to carry Dexedrine, because you drive every single day. So I told him, I said, yes. And he says, I'm driving. When I get home from Omaha tonight, when we land in Minneapolis, I'm driving to Montreal, and I need something to keep me awake. So what happened was I gave him 2. I says, this will be one for your ride there and one for your ride back. I says, it'll keep you up. You won't fall asleep. So unbeknown to me, he took one before his match, and he was sipping on Southern Comfort. So to make a long story short, he wound up taking both of them before he got on the plane.
Oh no.
And he drank a pint of Southern Comfort, and he was really, fidgety. So Adrian Adonis, who was on the plane, said, "Mad Dog," he says, "you're out of control." And he says, "I take deep suppers." He says, "I'm going to drive back." So Adrian gave him a Quaalude.
Oh shit.
Yeah, so he took this Quaalude and he was drinking wine on the plane. So they're flying at 6,500 feet back to Minneapolis, and all of a sudden Mad Dog decides to open the door of the plane, flying, at 145 miles an hour at 6,000 feet. And he actually had the door open, and he had one foot on the outside, and it scared the death. Thank God that door was chained hard onto the fuselage, because if the door would have come off and hit the tail, it would have killed everybody. So I didn't even know this happened until next morning. I get a call from the secretary, Mary Louise, at the wrestling office, said, "Jim Verne wants you to come in immediately." And, talk to him. So I didn't know what was going on. So I got in there, and he said to me, he says, "You almost caused the airplane to go down." I said, "What?" And he says, "Mad Dog," he says, "he took those pills you gave him." And he says, "he opened up the door." And I said, "Oh my God," So thank God that didn't result in a horrible tragedy. But Mad Dog was banned from the plane. And from that point on, I don't think that he got too many more main events. They were just a little scared of him. So it was always the big towns where you could fly nonstop commercially, so you wouldn't have to drive or stuff like that. But yeah, he's a real character.
That's a crazy story.
Yes.
Wow. I've never heard that one before. You've worked with another wild and out there name too. You and Greg did an angle in the AW with Bruiser Brody, correct?
Oh my God. Yeah. Frank was something. He was coming in. We had worked with him in Japan. Him and Stan Hansen. Holy Jesus.
Oh wow.
Talking about a wrecking crew. So Brody was coming into St. Paul, and I had gotten kicked in the stomach, and I need to have surgery. So Vern used this as an auspice for him to get some heat on me, and he wound up jumping on me, from the top rope, and boom, looked like he needed me in the stomach. So I was out for like about 4 or 5 weeks. So I remember I was coming back with him in Denver in a match, and consequently, before this match, he had gotten to somebody, one of the fans had slugged him, and he turned around and boom, decked him. And Vern didn't stick up for him, and so he had some civil suit, and he, had to bail himself out or whatever. So when we went in the ring, I'm supposed to be mad at him, and he wouldn't tie up with me. He wouldn't do nothing. And I thought, geez, I said, "Frank, for God's sakes, you just, caused me to miss 3 or 4 weeks." So he took off out of the ring, and he went into his locker room. So I'm running after him, run into the locker room, and he's taking off his boots already. And I says, "Frank," I says, "what's the matter?" I said, "Jim, don't worry about a thing. Everything's okay." He said, "Just go back to the ring. They'll count me out and everything." So that's what happened. He had said, because Vern didn't back him up, he said he just wasn't going to work in Denver. So thank God we had a match in St. Paul, and they smoothed things over. And I told him, I says, "Frank," I said, "this is my hometown." I says, "Please don't ruin it for me." But I felt so bad for Frank, because I had lunch with him in Kansas City. He was coming from Texas, and I was going to Los Angeles through Kansas City, and he was going to go to Puerto Rico. And it was that next night that he got murdered.
Wow.
And he had told me that he had some business dealings with Carlos Colon down there. He was part of the business, but that was just horrible. And he was such a unique talent, I mean, wherever he went, he was such a big guy, and he'd make those noises. And honest to God, I remember watching him in Japan. Him and Stan Hansen just beat the holy daylights out of him.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
my goodness.
And you watch them today too. Like you could slide Brody and Hansen into any era and it works, right? Like they still captivate me. I like to go back and get lost in the YouTube rabbit hole there. And Brody is one of the top searchers for me. His stuff in Japan with the funks, it's just captivating. It's magical.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he was. He made a fortune there for years, and he was a good guy. And I met his wife a couple times, and she seems so completely different, almost like a librarian, very, miss, type person, and well-educated. And I thought, holy smokes. So, maybe there was another side to Frank Goodish that nobody saw.
The gentle giant, right?
Yes. Yeah. He was a great football player too.
Mm-hmm.
Played with the Washington Redskins, big offensive tackle. Good guy.
Yeah, absolutely. You and Greg did some pretty great business with Jesse Ventura and Adrian Adonis as well, right? The East-West connection. You guys swapped the titles around a few times. What was it like working with Jesse and Adrian Adonis?
Well, Adrian was incredible. I mean, Jesse handled one end of the interviews. He was magnificent doing the interviews, and and that's the way he became governor of Minnesota. He could talk, and he believed in himself. And I think when the team was good because Adrian held the team together. Jesse could get by, but Adrian was superlative. He had great timing, and it got heat good, and did a great job, and that team was very good. And it's funny because when Adrian went to New York and we worked, he just completely fell off the wagon, and just was incredibly hard to work with. It's too bad. He's a good guy.
Yeah, he's one of those underrated talents too that, you see him bumping around like crazy. And he did the big character transformation when he got to WWF as well, did more of the flamboyant thing. He was really a jack of all trades, it looked like.
He was. And when he first came to the AWA, he only weighed about 240. And then when he was in the WWE, he was up to, 280, 290, and just, got a little too much involved with the night scene, and, just went downhill real quick.
Yeah.
I remember he got killed in Montreal, didn't he? And
he was in Canada, Saskatchewan, I think.
Yeah. And I heard about it. Geez. Yeah, it was just, and he was just coming around again too. He was cleaning up his act, and it's too bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What was it like working with the Road Warriors during this time in the AWA? I actually, before we jumped on Zoom here, I just watched you and Greg in Winnipeg fighting the Road Warriors. It was an awesome match. How was it in there with those guys at their peak?
The trouble working with the Road Warriors is they had projected such a strong image that it would be out of character for them to sell, period, in the ring.
Yeah.
So you had to fight for your life, and they didn't want to sell, and it was hard to have a good match with them. And I think actually we did pretty good in Winnipeg. We survived the match.
Yeah.
And I thought, geez, I said, come on, but I remember, they were hard to work with. And, I remember, I think it was Ole Anderson that got those guys together. And they were everything that Ole Anderson wanted to be, as far as a heel, big muscular heel that talked a lot of, good shit on the mic and didn't sell for crap. So, you were like invincible.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Another big guy you guys did some work with pretty much towards the end of your run there. You guys did some six mans with the incredible Hulk Hogan at the time. Did you know that like he was just getting ready to explode and take the world on fire? What was it like teaming in the ring with Hogan?
Well, incredible. He came to Minneapolis as a heel. John Sullivan came in came a couple weeks before and promoted him coming in, and he said, this guy, and then they finally bring him in, he'd made Rocky 3 or whatever it was. And people weren't used to a fellow that athletic being that big, and then he could talk. And what happened was in the AWA, that was the beginning of Hulkamania. He set record after record after record. And I think, to be honest with you, Vern Gagne was an all-American, wrestling type, baby face. And I think that the fact that this young muscle-bound guitar player came in and stole a lot of the thunder, sort of got on the fringes of Vern's ego. So I think that was probably one drawback why they never gave Terry the belt, because they were a little concerned, with that image and in the fact that it was completely different from Vern, to be a character. But hey, he actually learned a lot from Nick Bockwinkel, because they used to have incredible matches. And when he left, I'll never forget, he left, and I think it was some piddly deal about some t-shirt money. But I remember once he left, the WWE was well on its way, because he was the golden goose. He couldn't have done it without him. And he carried the water for a lot of guys for 3 years straight, and then boom, it just exploded.
Yeah. How was he backstage? When you ran into him again in New York and he was this mega larger than life guy, how was he? Was he the same guy, or did he?
No, he was, Terry Bollea is real quiet. He realized what he has to do. He's a smart guy, and, trained incredibly, and made this persona that, over eclipsed any other baby face for years. Quantum leaps in the wrestling business. And all of a sudden, boom, Vince said, hey, and Terry was making $50,000 a week on royalties.
Wow.
T-shirts, hats, thermoses, 50 grand a week. Plus he was making 12.5% of the gate. And in 1985, he was on the front cover of Sports Illustrated, and it said, athletes top banana, Hulk Hogan, $10 million.
Wow.
1985.
That's big money back then. That's big money today.
You're not kidding.
So kind of putting a bow on your AWA run then, what led to you making the jump over to Vince?
Well, here's what happened. Once Hulk left, and there was a number of guys that left, honestly, Jesse, Gene Okerlund, Rick Martel, Bobby Heenan, and what had happened was I had owned a gym. I opened a gym in 1982 called Jumping Jim Brunzell's Gym. And I needed, a little bit of extra money every month to keep that baby going. And what had happened was once Hulk was gone, and this was the case throughout the 26 different territories in the country, once Vince proceeded to start, picking and choosing who he was going to get, the houses went down, so I went to Vern and I said, listen, Greg and I have had a great run, 5 years, we've drawn a lot of money. And I said, I'm going to need a guaranteed contract, from you personally for me to stay here because I need extra money. And he said, well, how much money do you thinking? And I said, 95,000, a year. And he looked at me and he says, "You're not worth it." He said,
Wow.
"You can go to New York." And that just broke my heart. And 3 days later, I was on a small plane flying into Poughkeepsie. And it was funny because first guy I met was Hillbilly Jim, and a great guy, Jimmy Morris. And I go to TV, and I remember they had me do just a regular interview, babyface interview. So Gene Okerlund says, "Yeah, we want to welcome to the WWF at this time, Jumping Jim Brunzell, blah, blah, blah." So I'm talking and I'm doing a babyface interview and, nothing, just trying to be humble and whatever. So after the interview was done, Gene Okerlund says, "Well, you're going to have a lot to see when you see Jumping Jim Brunzell in the ring." So as I walk away, I hear Vince McMahon say, "Oh my God, another Backlund." And I looked and I thought, that didn't sound good. So, I thought, well, it's a babyface interview. Who am I going to be mad at? Who am I going to scream at? I'm not a character. I'm a athletic, all around athlete, babyface. So, but it was, a precursor of what was going to happen. Vince and I never did get along.
Oh yeah.
We were involved in a couple lawsuits where I was against him, and I won them. I won both of them, although he did wind up firing me 3 times. So I guess, he came out at the end, but I came out at the end too.
You did something that the United States government couldn't do. You beat him in court.
Oh, geez, I tell you, he postponed everything, and it was, I don't want to get into it, but there was a original contract that we signed, and all the boys signed it, and it was misleading in the facts of the mathematics of what we were paid according to what we got and to actually what was in this contract. So it worked out for the best of us, but Brian Blair thinks to this day the reason why we're not in the WWE Hall of Fame is because we sued him. I says, "Come on, Brian." I says, but a lot of people have asked us, "How come you're not in the WWE Hall of Fame?" And I said, "Well, Vince, for one thing," I said, "I'll take all the heat." I said, "He hates me." And I says, "I don't hate him, but I don't care for him."
That's fair.
Yeah.
You hear like so many different sides of Vince, right? And he's one of the most polarizing guys in the business. What did you think when he told you that you were going to be a killer bee?
I didn't mind as long as I was going to be you. I wanted to come in there and try to work, as single, but as long as they had an opportunity for Brian and I thought, here's what it was, Tyler. There was 26 territories. Then all of a sudden there was 2. Ted Turner still had WCW, and Vince had that WWF. So what happened was he sucked out all the talent. So on a given night, there was 60 guys wrestling in 3 towns. So they ran 3 towns every night, A, B, and C, and they had 20 guys in each town. So he just threw crap on the wall, and nothing made any sense at all. In most of the territories, like in the AWA or all the other territories, built matches on stories. You'd have one match lead to another match to have a big blow off, or a cage match or a lumberjack match. But Vince was completely different. He didn't care about building a storyline. He didn't care about telling a story. He just took everything and put it in a huge WWE or WWF shotgun and shot it at the wall, and when it stuck is what the fans got. And so consequently, he just look at all the different characters that he, created, and granted, a lot of them were great workers. Some of them weren't, but a lot of them made incredible money.
Yeah.
Incredible money.
What do you think it was just about you and Vince that didn't click? Was there like a certain incident that happened, or you guys were just different and just didn't click?
Well, to be honest with you, from the very first time I met him, that first night in Poughkeepsie, and in dealing with him and watching him, I knew we weren't going to like get along at all. And I had won a couple suits against him, and then I remember, he towards the end there, Brian, they let us go as a team, and they asked me to come back because they said, we'd like to keep you aboard just in case, some of the baby faces get hurt, you can, fill in. So I said, okay. So what they did though, and this was Vince's way of trying to humble me, was he put me on TV, with guys like Ted DiBiase or Bad News Brown or somebody. And then he wanted me to do the job for him. And in most cases, I did exactly what he wanted. And I remember working, and you can look this up too on YouTube, a match I had with Randy Savage.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I can't remember if it was Raw or what it was.
It was Superstar. I watched it the other day as well, actually, prepping
Did you?
for this.
Okay.
Yeah, it was fantastic match. Randy gave you a lot in that match.
Oh, he did. And I hit him right in the mouth when he played
Yeah.
right off the bat. And I thought, oh, geez, here we go. But it was a good match, and he gave me that full, elbow drop, boom. And I remember coming out of that match, and I was very happy with it. And we walked through the curtains there and walked just another. And here's Vince came up to both of us, and he said, "That's the best TV match I've ever seen." So I don't know if he was blowing smoke, but it was good, and I liked it, because Randy did make it a good match, whereas Ted DiBiase, I worked with him in Omaha, Nebraska. And I said to Ted, I said, Teddy, I said, I've been in Omaha for a long time with the AWA. So, let's have a good match. Oh, don't worry about it. Make a comeback and then I'll do this. So all of a sudden he's getting heat on me. He says, forget the comeback. And he just beat me 1, 2, 3. And I never talked to him again. And then I talked to him again. And it's 30 years down the road. And I said, you prick.
Yeah, that's a shitty thing to do, man. Why did you do that?
I know it. And then he's, sometimes he's apologetic. I'm sorry, I should have. And I said, yeah, you should have. But, now he's in trouble. You heard about it. Yeah, that's
a little bit of trouble there.
Yeah.
Everything comes full circle, right?
That's right. Yeah. Praise the Lord.
That's it. I want to go back. You mentioned a name that I think was a huge loss to the AWA when they lost them. And I Mean Gene Okerlund, that guy lent such credibility to any company he was with. But I love watching his little outtakes and bloopers. He seemed like he would just be the best guy to be around. What was Mean Gene like?
He was incredible. He was the best, interviewer by far. He could sense if somebody wasn't, and he could ad lib, and he, it's funny because most people don't realize that I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, once a month, we did like 3 or 4 hours of wrestling. And then we did it one day up in Poughkeepsie. And then the next day we flew up to Toronto and did it in the suburb of Toronto. I think where the heck it was, but it was
Brantford, Brampton,
Brantford. Yeah, Brantford. And I remember Billy Red Lyons was up there, and he actually was very influential about, having us be called the Killer Bees, and I thought, it's funny because I remember Billy Red, from my times in Winnipeg, and he came through, and then also in Toronto. And so I forgot what question you were asking.
I just talking about Mean Gene.
Yeah. He was incredible, and he was a dear friend, and we used to go down to Florida. Matter of fact, my wife and I just stayed in Siesta Key in Sarasota at one of his condos that he had sold back to the agency, and it was beautiful. And he was, without a doubt, like I said, the best announcer, and he just do hours and hours and hours of interviews. and he brought the best out in everybody, and he was Mean Gene.
Yeah, absolutely. He is the best. I love
He
Mean
was.
Gene, and I
Yep.
can't have you mention Billy Red Ryan. So throwing out one of those, don't you dare miss it. That was huge here in Toronto. Because he did all the Canadian stuff, right? He was our Canadian Mean Gene. So yeah, I love Billy Red every weekend. Don't you dare miss it. Was it was the way to be.
You know, I got to tell you too, when I went to Gene Okerlund's funeral, there was 8 guys that showed up. 8 guys from the whole crew. I mean, Vince wasn't there. None of that. There was one guy who worked in TV, and he's got a visible name. You probably know his name, but other than that, I guess there was a little heat between the Okerlund family and Vince. So he just chose, and I was surprised because Hulk wasn't there, and
they seemed like they were tight.
Yeah. And it was, I remember Greg Gagne and Brian Blair and and I think it was like 2 other guys there, and the rest, and I was really upset. Same thing with Bobby Heenan's funeral.
Wow, really?
Yeah, there was hardly anybody there.
That's sad because everyone talks like they were Bobby's best friend and Gene's best friend, and that's really disappointing to hear.
Yeah, it was because Bobby, there was probably even less. There was probably like 4 or 5 guys that came, but apparently that's the way they wanted to do it. So, but he was the greatest. Both of them were.
Yeah, absolutely. Legend, 2 legends. And you were involved in a pretty big legendary moment too. WrestleMania 2, you're in the Battle Royal with all the football players. What is it like being in there with a bunch of non-workers? The business is still being pretty protected at that time. Was there any animosity between the boys and the football players, or was everything kind of smooth sailings in there?
Well, I think everything, was good. Those guys sort of respected us, and probably, to be honest, they probably got paid more than the wrestlers did. and I, talking about WrestleMania, and I think we were in 3 of them, 2, 3, and 4.
2, 3, and 4, yeah.
Yeah, and 3 was the huge one, because we
Sheik and Volkov.
Yes, at Silverdome in Pontiac, Michigan, and that was sort of a crazy match because they introduced Hacksaw Duggan.
Yeah.
And that's the way they got him over. And I still don't understand the logic, because they were false finishing me, and they had fouled us to get that advantage, blah, blah, blah. So they're false finishing me. And then Jim Duggan, I think Cosro had the camel clutch on me or something. And all of a sudden, Jim Duggan runs in the ring with the big 2x4, and he blasts Volkov and he blasts Cosro, and they ring the bell and we get disqualified. So I remember one of the agents said, now after the matches, you go over and you pat Jim Duggan on the back and thank him. And
why?
For what? Yeah, getting disqualified? I thought, yeah. So I was glad that, and they had postponed that match in terms of being, where it was supposed to be. Actually, it was supposed to be on like 2nd, and they wound up having us on there right before Hulk and Andre. And the people didn't really care about the Killer Bees and Volkov and Sheik. They wanted to see that, so we couldn't go as long as we probably would have, but maybe it was a blessing after all.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's tough to be the act right before Hogan and Andre.
Oh,
right?
God, yes. Yeah.
How about Andre? Obviously he's a one of a kind. What's it like being around Andre the Giant? Any fun Andre stories that you can share?
Oh, gosh. He was very good to me, and I liked him. And he and I had been in many battle royals where at the very end, he and I were in there against three or 4 heels, and we had a little deal where he picked me up by the waist and pulled me up, and I drop kick him as these guys had come, and it got over with the people. And Andre was it was hard being a giant, and every place he went he couldn't couldn't relax or anything. And I remember you'd see him coming off the plane. And we used to have these Halliburton bags, which were metal bags. Everybody had them, and he had them. He had a bumper sticker on it. And when he get off the plane, he'd hold the bag up in front of him, and the bumper sticker said, "Don't get too close or I'll fart." So that's the way he greeted the guys. But I'll never forget too, we were going wrestling in Peoria, and this is for the AWA, and Wally Carbo told me, "Jim, I want you to rent a Cadillac and I want you to drive Andre from Peoria up to Moline because he's got to fly out there the next day and his girlfriend's meeting him at the hotel." So after the matches, Andre says, "Boss, we have to stop at the liquor store." So I said, okay. So he got a 12-pack of beer. I had some Pepsi. So we're driving, it's 90 some miles from Moline to Peoria, and I want to get there, it's about 10 o'clock. So we're driving, I'm going pretty fast. And all of a sudden I see this cop with his lights on, and boom, he pulls over at the meeting. He comes right up to me, and so I pull over, and guy says to me, he says, "You know why I stopped you?" And I said, "Well," I said, "I was probably speeding." I said, the fellow I'm taking here has got to catch a plane to New York for a TV show tomorrow morning." And so he takes a flashlight, and Andre's sitting in the right side. We got a big Cadillac, and he's sitting there and he's looking. So the cop takes a flashlight and he says, what do you got in the bag? And Andre says, "Beer." And he says, "What?" And he says, Andre looks at him and he says, "Beer." So the cop says, "Would you mind getting out of the car?" So Andre gets out of the car, and this cop sees how big he is. Holy Jesus. He goes back like that. And so he takes the bag, and out of 12 beers, I think 5 were left. And Andre had drank 7 beers in about less than 10 miles.
Jeez.
And you just pick them up and you go, whoop, and that was. So the cop says to Andre, he says, "Did you drink all those beers?" And Andre said, "Yes." And he looked at me and he said, "Did you have any?" I said, "No." I said, "I got Pepsi. I'm drinking Pepsi." And he says, "Holy Jesus, I've never seen anybody drink 7 beers in 10 minutes. So he says, put the beer in the trunk. He says, I'm just going to give you a speeding ticket." So he gives me, I don't know, it was about a $75 speeding ticket. So I thought, well, it's better than being arrested for open bottle. So we're driving down the road, and we're about 30 miles further. And Andre says, "Jimmy." I said, "Yes, Andre." He says, "Pull over." I says, "What for, boss?" He says, "I want to get the rest of the beer." So he drank the rest of the beer, but he as the legend goes, he had enormous capacity he drank 3 bottles of wine at night before the matches.
Holy.
3 bottles of Merlot. And he'd sit there and he'd play cribbage. And there was always guys that play cribbage, and he'd sit there with his tights on, his boots up, and all of a sudden they'd say, "Andre, you're up." And he'd put down the bottle of wine and he'd slap himself, pull his tights back up, and he says, "I'm ready." He'd walk out the door and away he'd go, But one real quick story, and I've told the story before. He was so good to me. We're up in Winnipeg, and they had a French little restaurant called Chez Andre. So I said, "Andre, I want to take you for a French lunch, and it's on me." He said, "Okay, boss." So we go in there, and I saw the menu was a special. It was a pork tenderloin, $6.99. And I thought, fantastic. So we get the pork tenderloin, and he gets it, and then he says to the waitress, he says, "I'd like 2 double Remy Martin." So he has 2 double cognac, and then he ordered a bottle of wine. So I says, "Andre," I says, "Wonderful." I said, "You've been so good to me. This is my treat." So I get the bill. It's $125. The $6.99 for 2. We had a $14 dinner, and it was $110 for booze. So I said to him, I says, "Andre," I says, "next time," I says, "I buy the food, you buy the booze." He said,
"Oh, that's amazing." Oh, I got a couple more questions. You've been so great with your time. I don't want to keep you forever. I could talk to you all day. This has been fantastic. Being from Toronto, you guys had a huge night in Toronto. You guys won the Frank Tunney Memorial Tag Team Tournament. Do you have any memories from that night? You worked some great guys in there. Demolition was one of the teams. Any memories of winning that tournament at all?
Well, nothing came of it.
Yeah. Did they ever talk about putting the belts on you guys?
Well, supposedly they had, but I didn't have any faith. And first of all, George Scott was a booker there, and he had fired me in North Carolina. And he was okay, but I just didn't understand his logic, as far as his finishes. They were actually some of the worst finishes I ever had in my career. But, it was fun. Toronto was always good. And I love Frank Tunney. And I remember going afterwards, and Bobby Heenan had a joke about Frank Tunney. He says, Frank Tunney, he says, he's the cheapest promoter in the business. And I said, oh, yeah. I said, how's that? And he says, well, he pays you in hot dogs and beer. And he says, he doesn't even have to pay for it. The stadium did. We, after the matches, we'd go and sit with him, and he'd have hot dogs. And it was fun. He had a couple guys with him. But, he was quite the guy, Frank Tunney. God.
Yeah,
it was good too. I love Toronto. We had good crowds there, and I'm trying to remember who the heck I think we wrestled the Samoans there one time too.
Yeah, you guys had the big at the exhibition stadium with Hogan and Orndorff. You were on that one there. It was a big house in Toronto outside.
Oh, that was the main event. It was called, I think. And I had the drop kick picture on the front page. They had me drop kicking Dory Funk. And to this day, I have I consider two of the best dropkick pictures ever taken, and they were both Dory Funk. I hit Dory Funk with a dropkick in Tokyo. Oh God, I hit him right in the head. And that one there was in Toronto, and I remember they had like 70,000 people there. And I think it was Orndorff and Hulk. That was it, wasn't it? The main event. Yeah.
Orndorff and Hogan. They were setting the world on fire there. Yeah.
Oh God, that was huge. And I was just, I fell out of my chair. I saw the front page on the paper the next morning, and God, I thought, holy geez, can you imagine mainstream sports having a picture of a wrestling event on the front cover of the Toronto Sun.
Yeah, and that was like one of their biggest houses for years in the company as well. Yeah,
it was. And I remember it took me about 6 weeks for the photographer to give me the. I said, "Don't worry, I won't use it." Because I had little business cards made on it, and I've had I don't know 4 different orthopedic surgeons, and this one guy did 3 operations on me, and I signed a great big picture. It was probably this big, and he has it in his office, and he's got football players and basketball players and hockey players, and only one wrestling of me and my dropkick. But it's truly a great shot.
I got to stick on the Canadian theme. You and the Hart Foundation.
Yes.
The 4 of you guys, you and Brian and Jim and Brett. What was it about the chemistry you guys had? Because I don't think it was possible for you guys to have a bad match.
Well, it was good. Brett was incredible. He was a marvelous worker. And Jimmy Hart, was good for him. Jim Neidhart was a little hard to work with in that he was a little moody, in the ring, and he was a powerful guy. God, he was like 5'9", 275, but he liked his treats, and consequently, you never know what, and he used to hate to take a drop kick from me. He said, Jimmy, and this is the way he talk real fast. Jimmy, I don't want to throw a drop kick. I'm not going to take a drop kick. So I said, Jim, I said, when you come off the ropes, I said, put your hand right here. I said, my feet will hit there and you'll be fine. So it's time to throw the drop kick. All of a sudden I say, okay, drop kick. So I go to throw him in, and he pulls away. So he pulls away like this. So when he goes down, my feet are dropping from, 7 feet, and they come down, and my heel hits him right here.
Oh no.
And it puts a little dent in his eye socket here, and a little bit of blood starts coming, and he comes up and he's furious. So I grab him, still in the comeback, and I go to hit him. He hit me so hard in the solar packs. I just froze in the ring. I couldn't do nothing. And I looked over at Brett and I said, "Get in here." So thank God. But Jimmy was that, he complimented the team, but he was just a wow man. Oh God, he was so hard to work with. Oh, yeah.
Another guy, after you guys were in the WWF, you did a bit of work for Herb Abrams in the UWF. What was that whole experience like? The dark side of the ring came out on him, and it just looked like this guy was on a different planet than everybody else.
Well, he was crazy. He had some money, and he lived it up. I remember we were wrestling at the MGM, and they had half the stadium, taped off or curtained off, and I remember his logic. He could party with the best of them, but he really didn't know the wrestling business like he should have, because I'm sure he lost money. Because I remember he did a show in Hawaii, and he did that one in Las Vegas. Oh my God. He had God, I remember he had about 4 or 5 hookers in the room with him, and he was up until about 5 o'clock before the day of the show. So he still, he was, I thought, oh my goodness, well, here we go. So it worked out okay, but he was in and out before anybody knew exactly what he was all about.
At least got some work for the boys, right?
Yeah, he did. And he liked us. Excuse me.
The last couple of questions I got for
Sure.
you here, and I'll let you go.
Okay.
During your run in the 90s there, when you were doing a bit of work as a singles, you said Vince asked you to come back as kind of on standby.
Sure.
Did you ever pitch any ideas to Vince about doing more than that, or was it just kind of that was what you were doing and that was it?
Well, here was the best idea I had for him. I said, Vince, I says, I know that you take some seriousness about my interviews. I said, why don't you come out when I'm doing an interview and complain about it? I said, I'll beat the shit out of you. And then I said, we'll come around afterwards and I'll put you over in all the towns. And he looked at me and he says, Jimmy, he said, that'll never happen. That was my suggestion to him.
That's the greatest thing I've ever heard.
Oh God, he and I just didn't get along. It was just
Well,
and then Brian was so afraid. Oh, we got Vince this and that. I said, So
well, the last thing I'll ask you, the last guy I'll ask you about here, and then I want you to plug everything that you're working on. I know you got some books and comic books and stuff. You did a lot of work with Curt Hennig at this time, and I watched a few of the matches doing prep for this, and again, the chemistry between you guys was so good. Inside and outside the ring, how was it being around Curt?
Well, Curt was, I knew his dad. His dad beat the crap out of me.
Yeah, Minnesota boy, right?
Yeah, first year that I was in the business, he used to stand on my chest. Larry, and he was a big guy. Larry was like 6'3" and 295, and he'd have his foot on my chest, and he says, "How much money are you making this week?" And I says, "About $800." And then he'd stop me and he said, "Learn how to earn it by selling right." That's what he said. But Curt was a tremendous hand, natural, good looking, good body. I mean, there's no telling, how far he could have gone. And I have no idea, what transpired between him and Vince, because there must have been a falling out somehow, because, he was getting pushed real hard, and he was what was he was I can't remember if it was a junior heavyweight. What the championship? It was
Intercontinental. Yeah.
Intercontinental, yeah. And he did a good job. And God, he could work with anybody and could do anything. And then, he just he was another one of those guys. I mean, there was about 4 or 5 of them together. It was Bobby Duncombe Jr. and Ray Fernandez, and it was Ray Traylor.
Rude.
Yeah, Rick Rude and Kurt. And honest, the guy, you couldn't tell him nothing. I tell him, it's no secret that, there was a lot of drugs in the 80s and, in the, society, period. And it was rampant, in the wrestling world too. And it was hard to see so many of these guys do this so cavalierly. They didn't realize that, these drugs are strong, and you can't mix these drugs, you can't mix this with that. They don't mix, or you can't drink and do this. But they wouldn't listen to you.
Yeah.
And consequently, we lost, I don't know how many guys, but it was horrible. I mean, and young guys, honest to God, and Kurt was out. Oh God, I'll never forget that funeral. It was so sad. And he was a wonderful kid, great father, and just an enormous talent.
Yeah, his boy's a hell of a worker too. Joe, he went on to win the Intercontinental title as well.
Yeah, I saw Joe. Matter of fact, Joe and I were down in Dallas together, and he was down there. And I hadn't seen Joe since he was a little kid, But I brought this here, and this is my book. I don't know. Badlands. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. But this is a book. I know Brian Blair is there. You can see a little better.
There you go.
Yeah, that little picture, I was 6 years old, and I was on an atoll, which is a small island in the Marshall Islands called Kwajalein. My dad was in the Navy. And then that's the way that picture was taken yesterday, really. But I have some great pictures in here. There's a couple. There's a whole chapter on Bruce Springsteen. And,
oh, wow.
And all, I wrote this book by myself. My wife compiled, I don't know how many stories. I had like 46, 47 stories, and it condensed it into it. It's just real quick read, nothing real, dynamic or, earth shaking, but it's online at a company called Blurb.
Okay.
BLURB.com, and it's called Matlands, and it's done pretty well. And it's funny, I really appreciate the opportunity to do these podcasts, because I plug this book. And it's funny, after I did a podcast with this fellow in Great Britain about 3 months ago, and I think we sold about 30 books in that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, at first it was $25. It's nothing real expensive, but there's some great stories in here, and it's all my own photography. Matter of fact, here's Hulk Hogan with my grandsons.
Oh, that's an awesome picture.
Yeah, so it was fun, and my wife put the thing together, and it was edited about 4 or 5 times, and it's done pretty well. I'm thinking about making it a hardcover and then going on Amazon, but
nice.
We'll see. Some people say, why don't you write another one, call it Matlands 2? And I said, crap, I don't think I can remember the stories.
I don't know. I mean, after talking with you the last hour, the stories have been endless and they've been incredible. And, I can't thank you enough for doing this. It's been a true honor.
Well, thanks, Tyler. I appreciate it. I'm sorry about the follow up earlier in the year when I goofed up and I forgot about it.
Oh, that's okay. Hey, we got it done, right?
Yeah. I don't know if you've gotten the book, but send me your email address and then give me your address and I'll send you one.
Oh, I appreciate that so much.
Okay.
Absolutely. I appreciate
Okay.
that. Well, I'll tell you what, everybody, thank you for listening this week. On behalf of Jumpin' Jim Brunzell, one of the greatest guys that you can ever talk to, we have been counted out.